Chapter 12. Near the Fako Mountain. The journey to Bwenga was long and tiring, and the heavy loads made things even worse. As a fresh student, Bamu had lots of things to bring along. His mother kindly consented to see him off to college, since his father would be working. It was a journey of 20 miles, and most of it was climbing uphill. But Bamu and his mother kept up a lively conversation on all imaginable topics, recounting old experiences, wondering what the future held for them, remarking about the many people they met on the road, hoping that life in Bwenga would be pleasant. And before they knew it, there was Bwenga, with its whitewashed buildings shining in the sun straight ahead of them. As they entered the compound, a tall, nice-looking young man walked up to them. "Welcome, mother," he said. "Have you brought our son to college?" "Yes, my child," Bamu's mother replied, much relieved, because they had been wondering about what to do and where to go when they arrived. "I have brought your small brother to college. He has never been here before, you see." "This way, mother," the young man cut in kindly. "First, we shall go to the dormitory. Let's see, what's your name, young man?" "Mbamu. George Mbamu, sir." He looked through the sheet of paper in his hand and nodded. "You will be in the junior dormitory. It is good you have come early so you can choose a good bed for yourself. Come." Mbamu and his mother followed him to the junior dormitory, where Mbamu was told to choose any bed he liked, except those at the ends of the room, which were reserved for the captain of the dormitory and all the senior students. He chose one away from the main door and opposite a window. It was quite a comfortable bed with raised sides to stop one from falling off at night. Some of the other beds were simply two pieces of plank on two stands. Mbamu did not like such camp beds. One could easily roll off at night. He was happy with his choice. He put his things on the bed to indicate ownership and then went off with his mother and the tall young man to the principal's office. "Welcome, madam. You have brought your son to college, eh?" "Yes, father." The principal's way of speaking was very difficult to understand, so Mbamu's mother simply answered, "Yes, father," to whatever he said. "Have you got his first term fees?" "Yes, father." "Well, out with it." "Yes, father." School fees, Mbamu whispered to his mother. She fumbled in her bag and produced the 18 pounds, most of it in coins. The principal counted it laboriously, and at the end of the job, his face lit up with joy. Most of the students paid their fees on a term-by-term basis. A good number usually owed fees, and sometimes the students were driven from school to bring the fees, and they were not accepted back until they had brought the full fees. The principal was therefore very happy to have this new student come with his full fees. "Oh, very good. These fees are for the whole year. I thought you said it was for one term only." "Yes, father. Here's your receipt." "Yes, father." "I'll also tick your name here." "Yes, father. And here so that there should be no trouble in the kitchen." "Yes, father." "Goodbye, madam. I hope your son likes it here." "Yes, father." Mbamu definitely liked it at Bwenga. As soon as his mother had gone, he joined a few boys who were playing football in the field just near the dormitories. At first, Mbamu was shy as ever, simply stood near the goalpost watching. At Quito, the boys used to play with a football made from leaves wrapped around with strings or strands of latex rubber in the shape of a ball. He could count the number of times he had actually kicked a real ball. But here was a real ball. If only he could join them, he thought. "Hey, you," one of the boys hailed. "Come join us." Soon Bamu was enjoying a good game of football. He was kicking, dribbling, shooting. For 3 hours, he played there with a handful of boys, almost the same size as himself, but obviously older. When Bamu got back to the dormitory to where he had kept his things, He could not believe his eyes. His things were still there all right, but the bed he had chosen had vanished, and in its place was a camp bed. He looked all around, but he could not find his bed. The other beds were all well made and white with sheets and pillowcases. Then he realized his mistake. He had simply placed his things on the bed, and he made the bed. Nobody would have taken it away. That night, he fell off the camp bed, and he cursed his stupidity earlier in the day. The following day, he changed his bed. Not all the boys had come, and there were still a few vacant beds around. His new bed was not as good as the first, it squeaked, but was much better than the camp bed. The opening conference was very impressive. All the fathers and African tutors sat on the stage in the assembly hall, and the students sat on benches in the main body of the hall. Mbamo looked carefully all over the hall. Where he sat in front were small boys like himself. Behind him, the boys were older and bigger, until right at the back of the hall were very big boys looking older than some of the tutors stood. The small boys addressed the senior boys as sir. Actually, only the finalists who were called tops were expected to be addressed as sir. But since it was the first day of the term, Mbamo and his new friends could not tell who were tops and who were not. To be on the safe side, they simply addressed any big and tough-looking boy as sir. Mbamo saw the tall young man who had helped him and his mother when they first arrived sitting on the stage. This meant he was a tutor. Mbamo was relieved to know that he had been very respectful to him. Then the principal entered the hall and everybody rose, even the fathers and the tutors. He walked majestically in his white cassock to his seat in the center of the stage. There was dead silence in the hall. "Let us pray," he said. He led the prayers, which Mbamo could not follow since he did not know them. The prayers started, "Under the protection, dearest mother." The principal's speech was long and apparently interesting, but Mbamo did not understand most of what was said. He laughed when others laughed and clapped with them, but he did not know why. Everybody seemed happy after the conference, so Mbamo was cheerful too. Outside the hall, Mbamo felt like attending to the call of nature. He went up to a big boy who was standing nearby, looking like a senior student and should know the compound well. "Excuse me, sir," Mbamo said shyly. "Could you show me where I can urinate?" "What? You mean the toilet? Go around the corner there, boy." "Thank you, sir." Mbamo did not find the toilet, but since he was not very hard pressed, he went to the dormitory thinking that he must have misunderstood the senior student. Later that day, he again bumped into the same boy. "Hey, here's the boy who wanted to urinate," the boy announced to the group of boys around. Mbamo was of course not happy at the joke, but he merely smiled. "What's your name, boy?" the boy asked. "George Mbamo, sir," Mbamo replied. "Where do you come from?" "I come from RCM School, Quito, sir." "I don't mean the school, I mean your tribe." "Let the boy go," cut in another boy. "Why are you worrying this poor boy?" Mbamo ran off much relief, but imagine his shock and real surprise when the next day in class he discovered that his interrogator was none other than his own classmate, a Form 1 student, and Mbamo had all the time been addressing him as sir. Mbamo never forgot that boy. The classes were very interesting and much more interesting than in the primary school. The teachers here knew so much. They were called tutors. Teachers were found only in primary school. They were fond of reciting long passages by heart, and this impressed the students very much. A few of the subjects were familiar, like arithmetic, English, history, and geography, but others were unfamiliar, and Mbamu had certainly never heard of them before, like geometry, algebra, Latin, and science. There was so much to learn in the college. During his first Latin class, Mbamu discovered that it was the same language that the priest used in saying Mass. He had all the time thought that this was God's own language, and he felt honored to be able to learn God's language and to be able to construct sentences in Latin. This early enthusiasm soon died away when he was beset by so many rules and new words and verbs, which he had to memorize and conjugate declensions, the lot. And to make matters worse, the Latin tutor was very harsh, and he used to punish boys for making mistakes. Usually it was half an hour or an hour's grass cutting on Saturday. But sometimes the boys were asked to write out a sentence many times. Once a boy was punished by being told to write 1,000 times, in quote. The verb to be never takes the accusative case, end of quote. Other classes, however, were less demanding and the tutor less serious. In one lesson, the English tutor asked Mbamu's class to describe their journey to Bwenga. It was meant to be an exercise in oral composition, and many students gave very interesting accounts of their journey to Bwenga. One boy, whose name was Gregory, drew great laughter from the class when he stood up to describe his journey. I got up in the morning, bathed and ate, he began. Then I said farewell to my father and my mother. I took my bag and started to come to Bwenga. I traveled and traveled and traveled and traveled. The distance was very long. Laughter. Then I traveled and traveled and traveled and traveled. And I traveled and traveled. More laughter. And traveled, hysterical laughter. And traveled. Wait a minute. The teacher cut in, also racked with laughter. What did you do after traveling? I traveled and traveled and traveled, and from that day, Gregory was nicknamed the Traveler. Whenever the college was visited by important people like the bishop, the district officer, the education officer, the reverend fathers from other parishes, all the students used to sing to them by way of entertainment. Mbamu loved these informal sing-song concerts very much. They were always in the evening. The senior staff of the college, all of them fathers, lived in a 2-story building. After supper, together with their guests, they would sit in the balcony of their parlor on the top floor, drinking whiskey, brandy, gin, or beer. The students would gather on the lawn below and sing songs, some of their favorite songs. They always started with the college song. Near the Fako mountain, high above the sea, stands St. Michael's College, a place for you and me. 'Tis here that we learn biology and geometry and chemistry. Oh, Bwenga by the mountain. Oh, Bwenga by the sea. Mbamu was always in ecstasy when this song was sung. It was the embodiment of all his academic ambitions. Actually, there were 3 verses, but he knew only the first. In the song, he saw himself as a new Mbamu, a learned Mbamu, now in the highest institution in the country, the only place in the country where biology, geometry, and chemistry were studied. He felt proud and happy to be in Bwenga. He would look up and see the principal drinking and conversing with the other fathers and guests. It was an honor indeed, not only to be in Bwenga, but to be this close to the white man. They would also sing, "Hail Columbia, Happy Land." He did not know where Columbia was, but that did not matter. The singing here was much better than in his old school. The big boys here sang the bass well, and that brought out the melody. They would also sing Annie Laurie and many other songs. Most of the songs had been taught to them by one of the fathers, but there was one song which Bamo liked most apart from the college songs, which was a native song called Bona na Ponda. First, the students would hum a verse, then sing it aloud. This used to thrill Mbamu very much. He was always sorry when the show came to an end. That's the end of chapter 12. And now we go to chapter 13. Chapter 13, our final chapter. The stolen tire. While Mbamu was enjoying his new life as a student, all was not well at home. Ever since George, the ex-foreman at the warehouse in Beaver, was transferred, relations had been strained between the rest of the workers and Elate. Before George left, he had poisoned the minds of all the workers in the warehouse against Elate. He had told them that Elate was responsible for his transfer and that they should beware of him. He had told the new foreman that Elate was a thief, although Thomas found nothing wrong with Elate's work. He still had subconscious dislike for Elate, but the others disliked him openly. When they heard that Elate had sent his son to Bwenga, the dislike was intensified. Where has he got the money to send his son to college? They asked one another. What does he think he is? He thinks he is more important than ourselves. A mere watchman to have a son in Bwenga. We shall show him where he belongs. We'll teach him to know his position and keep it. And so they started to plot Elate's downfall. From that day, their sole aim was to get Elate out of the warehouse and, if possible, out of employment at the plantation altogether. But the manager had other aims for Elate. Since Elate became a watchman, there had been a definite drop in the rate at which things were stolen from the warehouse. In fact, for 6 months after George left, nothing was reported missing or stolen from the warehouse. The manager was sure that Elate was responsible for this. Elate was honest and hardworking. I must compensate him for this. The manager thought to himself, but how? If only Elate could read and write. Meanwhile, the workers at the warehouse had hatched a plot. They would steal something and put the blame on Elate. Yes, that would do it. The next morning, one of the workers, a mechanic, came up to Thomas and said they had discovered something terrible. What is it? Asked Thomas, very much bewildered. Follow me and you will see for yourself. Thomas and some of the other workers who had claimed to have made the discovery went out of the warehouse. A few yards away, amongst the tall grass, they stopped abruptly. Can you see anything? Asked the mechanic. No. What is it, a snake? Asked the foreman, moving backwards. No, the mechanic laughed. Open up the grass and see what is inside. Thomas tore the tall grass apart, and behind it was a small car tire, well hidden under the grass. Have you seen the car from which this tire was removed? Thomas asked. Yes, it is Mr. White Austin's car, came the reply. He brought this car yesterday for servicing. Have you any idea who might have done this? Asked Thomas. Who else? Was the reply in chorus from the workers. It must be Elate, of course. He was here for night duty and left early this morning. He must have been afraid to carry the tire home because at that time many workers are on their way to their place of work. Yes, thought Thomas, it must be Elate all right. After all, I was warned against him. Aloud he said, the manager must know about this. Imagine the fool to steal from the manager's own car. Thomas made the complaint to the manager that same day. Are you sure it is Elate? Asked Mr. White. Yes, sir. It could have been no one else. Surely, if it were one of the workers, he would have taken it away and not have left it lying behind the warehouse. Quite true, Thomas. Tell Elate and the mechanic who found the tire to see me. You should come along also. When Elate heard a knock on his door, he was told that the manager wanted to see him. He did not in the least suspect what was in store for him. On the way, he knocked his left toe painfully against a stone. That was a big sign, and he wondered why the manager had sent for him. Well, he had not stolen. Only a thief should be afraid, he reasoned within himself. Well, Elate, have you seen this tire before? They were seated in the manager's office with the exhibit on the floor. No, sir. There are many old tires in the warehouse, but I don't know if this is from there, Elate replied. I have been told that you tried to steal this tire last night, and what is worse, from my own car. No, sir. What should I be stealing a tire for? I have no car. To sell it to the traders. That's why, replied the mechanic. These Africans are all the same. You can't trust any of them. After all the high hopes I had for Elate, now this, thought Mr. White. But aloud he said, this is a criminal case, Elate, and you should be jailed for this. However, I am kind and shall not take you to court. But to set an example for the rest, you are hereby dismissed. You may remain in your house till you have got somewhere to go. Master, have mercy, cried Elate. He could not believe his ears. Master, I have a family and children. Have mercy. That verdict was final. When Elate broke the sad news to his wife, she fell down and started wailing. Both of them were thinking of the same thing. Mbamu. What shall we do with your son, father of Mbamu? Asked his wife. I don't know. We shall have to return him to Tem. Mbamu must discontinue his schooling. It is such a blessing that we paid his fee for a whole year. At least he can finish this year there. And then he could not bear to complete the sentence. Oh, what have we done? For God to be so angry with us, sobbed his wife. Meanwhile, there was great rejoicing in the warehouse. You ought to have heard him. Master, have mercy. Master, have mercy, mimicked the mechanic, at which they all laughed. Yes, I'll see how the son of his will stay in Bwenga. He'll be home in a week's time for good. I wonder why they even let him stay in the corporation's house. All this went on behind Thomas's back, for he genuinely believed that Elate was a thief. All the workers were happy that he had gone, except one young lad called Mbong, an apprentice to the mechanic, who was sorry that an innocent man had been dismissed. With Elate out of the way, the workers began again to pinch things from the warehouse. Within 3 weeks, a tin of kerosene, an inner tube, a foot pump for inflating tires, and a set of tools all vanished from the warehouse. All this worried Thomas very much, for he did not know that the workers were responsible for the losses. Mbamu came home for holiday a week after his father was dismissed from work. The holidays were short, lasting only 2 weeks. He noticed on arrival that the usual mirth in the house had gone. There was gloom everywhere, and his parents had added a few wrinkles since his last visit home. Let's not spoil his vacation. Let him continue to think that all is well, Mbamu's mother told his father. But what about the job? He will surely notice that I no longer go to work. That can be easily covered up. Go out at the usual time. If it is afternoon shift, you can go visit some friends or go for a stroll anywhere you please. Mbamo must not know what has happened, or else it would affect his studies. And so Mbamo spent 2 weeks holiday at home without knowing that his father was out of work, and he continued to be cheerful as usual. Mama, when I finish school and start working, I shall not allow Papa to work as a laborer again. We shall all stay together in my big house, and I shall take care of all of you. Tears formed in his mother's eyes. If only the boy knew that the next term would be his last in college. When Mbamo was about to return to Bwenga, his mother told him not to expect any pocket money this time. You see, it is not yet payday, and your father has not received money yet. We shall send you some money after month's end. She was hoping that by then she would have sold a few vegetables and fruit. Don't worry, Mama. I still have some money. Besides, you should be keeping the money for the school fees next year. Is it not so, Papa? Yes, my son. But he avoided his son's eyes. Mbamo returned to college full of high hopes for the new term and bright dreams for the future. Mbong, the apprentice, was an honest young lad with a strong conscience. He was not happy with the workers at the warehouse. Not only had they caused an innocent man to be dismissed, but they were also stealing a lot from the warehouse. He always felt guilty whenever he met Thomas, as if he, Mbong, was the thief. Thomas too was honest. Mbong never saw him pitch any of the corporation's property. One day, about 3 weeks and a few days after Elate had been dismissed, Mbong decided to tell Thomas the whole truth about the other workers. What triggered off his decision was the unfair behavior of the workers towards Mbong. When they saw that he never took anything from the warehouse, the workers started to jeer at him and call him names. They called him Angel Gabriel or Saint Joseph. They started to avoid his company and keep him at a distance. If he was approaching a group, one person in the group would say, Angel Gabriel is coming, and the rest would stop talking until he was a safe distance away. On this day, the mechanic called him to a quiet corner in the warehouse. Come here, Angel Gabriel. Mbong followed him. Do you remember what happened to Elate? The reason was that he kept away from us. I am warning you, be careful. That did it. After work, Mbong loitered behind in the warehouse, pretending to be tidying up. And as soon as he noticed that all the workers had gone, leaving only him and Thomas, he walked up to Thomas and narrated the whole conspiracy against Elate. And what is more, Massa, every single item stolen from this warehouse is taken by them. Why did you tell me all this before? Asked Thomas. I was afraid of them. Tomorrow you will come with me to the manager. He has got to know everything. You will tell him exactly what you just told me, right? Yes, Massa. The manager was furious when he heard Mbong's story the next morning. He paced up and down his office. Has Elate left his house yet? Asked Mr. White. No, sir, answered Thomas. Good. I had always known that Elate was an honest man. He is the best watchman we have ever had. I knew something fishy was going on in that warehouse. Go away and say nothing to anyone, understood? Yes, sir. Elate and his wife had started packing their belongings, for the overseer had told them that they should leave the camp within the next week. Elate was quite grateful for this. A month's grace was fair enough. They heard a car approaching, and they came out of the house to see who it was. It was the manager. He must be going to see the overseer or the timekeeper. He went back to continue packing. When the car sounded its horn in front of their house, Mr. White came out and stood in the yard. Elate, he called. Yes, Massa, answered Elate, running out. Come and see me in my office tomorrow morning. Yes, Massa. Uh, by the way, my back tire is soft. A nail must have gone in or something. Can you change it for me? All right, master, I shall try, but I have never changed one before. Elate went straight to the wheel and started to pull it towards him. Not like that. Use a spanner. Mr. White brought out his toolkit and gave him a set of spanners, but Elate looked at them with amusement. You use a spanner to get the knot off so that the tire can become loose. Mr. White explained. I see. Elate selected one spanner which was clearly too big for the small Austin knot and started to bang it against the wheel drum. Clearly, he just did not know how to remove or fit a tire. Oh, what a fool I was, thought Mr. White. To have thought that this man stole the tire. He doesn't even know how to take off a tire. Aloud, he said, don't worry, Elate. I shall take it to the garage. See you tomorrow. Elate was reinstalled to his old job. He was given his full pay for the period he had been out of work. Mr. White told him that the thief had been caught, but he did not tell Elate Mbong's story. Joy and happiness once more returned to Elate's home, and they were very pleased that they had not spoiled Mbamu's vacation. However, the problem of Mbamu's continued education at Bwenga still plagued them. Although Elate had his job back, he was not sure of saving enough money for the school fees. In fact, the corporation was offering scholarships to sons of her workers in Bwenga College. A circular was sent round to all areas asking suitable persons with children in the college to apply for the scholarship. The foreman at the warehouse treated the circular like all other circulars. He pinned it up on the notice board. The workers saw it and knew that only Elate could benefit from it, but nobody told him. And since he could neither read nor write, he never knew of the scholarship scheme. 1 month later, the circular was removed from the notice board, with Elate still in ignorance about it. The final day of the school year brought joy and happiness to many and tears to a few at Bwenga College. The examination had been long and weary. A boy had collapsed in Form 3 when he found that none of the questions he had prepared in history were asked. It was a tense audience of students that sat in the assembly hall that morning, waiting for the results of the exams to be released. Mbamu succeeded. He was 12 out of 30. 2 boys had failed badly in his class and were dismissed. Later, all the students got their boxes out of the dormitories. Mbamu saw one of the boys dismissed from his class, a very small boy, as small as himself, crying bitterly beside his huge trunk. Mbamu wondered whether the boy was crying because he had failed or because he was thinking of how to get his huge trunk home. Mbamu arrived home in Beaver safely and in very high spirits. He was now a Form 2 student. Papa, I passed my exams, he announced as soon as he arrived. I was the 12th. Oh, Mama, I am now a Form 2 student. Well done, my son, his father said. We shall discuss all about Bwenga later. You must be tired and hungry after trekking for 20 miles. Your mother will give you some food, and after that we shall talk. Elate was quite decided on how the talk would go. Mbamu can continue at Bwenga, he kept telling himself. I shall not be able to cope with the fees, and the sooner the truth is faced, the better for everybody. In the evening, while the younger children were playing outside and watching the sunset, Elate held the family meeting in the bedroom. Tell us the news you have brought from Bwenga, my son, he opened up tactfully. He allowed Mbamu to recount all the petty adventures with his friends in college. After the prattle, Elate asked, did the principal not give you a letter for me? Oh, yes. There is a letter addressed to all parents and guardians. I was in such a hurry that I did not even look at it. Mbamu fished it from his box and read it aloud. It gave a list of all the things required in the new school year, most of which Mbamu already had. Then came the fees and the shock. Why have you stopped, Mbamu? It's the fees. They have been increased from £18 to £20. And also, book fees have been introduced, a further £3 a year, making the total fees for next year £23. That's it, his father exclaimed. My son, the sooner you face the truth, the better. You know that I cannot afford the money. Yes, Papa. You know that I want only the best for you. And yes, Papa, tears were in Bamu's eyes. You see, you cannot continue your schooling at Bwenga College. Yes, Papa. I understand. He left the room. Mother of Mbamu, Elate addressed his mother. There is nothing we can do. We have already tried our best. Yes, father of Mbamu, we have tried our best, she replied meekly. And they went on chatting over several other family problems while Mbamu, very sober now, was quietly reconciling himself to the new situation. It was clearly going to be the worst holiday ever in his life. As Elate got up to leave the room, his wife remarked casually that he could solicit help from Mr. White. When you are in difficulty, she said, you must not leave any stone unturned. Just ask him. Nothing bad can come of asking. All right, Elate replied. I shall try. He yawned. Clearly, he had no faith in the request. It was not until a week after this that Elate went up to the manager. He knocked on his door and wondered how he should frame his request, which clearly was a useless one. Come in, said Mr. White. Oh, it's you, Elate. How's the warehouse? Any more stealing? No, massa. No more stealing, said Elate. What can I do for you? My son has just come back from on holiday, Elate replied. Yes, is he ill? No, massa. But he will not be returning to school again. Why? Has he been dismissed? No, sir. It is the school fees. The fees are above me, and I can't send him back to school, so I am withdrawing him. That's a pity, but I thought the fees are only £2 or is it £3 a year? Surely you can afford that. In which school is he? He is not in school, sir. He's in Bwenga College. What? Your son in Bwenga? Why didn't you tell me all this time, you fool? Didn't you see the circular about scholarship awards? What, massa? Never mind. When did your son go to Bwenga? He has been there for 1 year now, massa. He left school in Standard 4 and went straight to Form 1, massa. What's his name? After Elate had given Mbamu's name and all relevant facts about his son, he was told to go home. Mr. White did not indicate whether he would help Mbamu or not. So Elate thought that must be the end of it. He told his wife and she replied simply, but you tried. Weeks later, Mbamu was planning his return to Quito school. He would ask for exemption from Standard 5. This should be quite easy to get, he thought, since he had passed from Form 1 to Form 2 in Bwenga College. He was arranging his old primary school books and sorting out the new books he had brought from Bwenga, which he thought might help him in Standard 6. When he heard a knock on the door, it was the manager's messenger. What's wrong? Bamu asked. Wrong? Who said something was wrong? I want a latte, the watchman at the warehouse. That is a letter for him from the manager. Well, give it to me. I am his son. Okay, sign here as having received it, Mbamu signed the mail register and took the letter. His parents were watching through the window and wondering what new trouble was on the way. Papa, here is your letter from the manager, said Mbamu, handing over the letter to his father. Well, open it, his father said, and read it. Mbamu opened the letter and read the content aloud. It was a short letter. I have the pleasure of informing you that your son, George Mbamu, has been awarded a scholarship by the African Fruit Corporation to study in Bwenga College. The scholarship includes full tuition fees, boarding fees, and all other fees that the college might deem necessary to establish. In addition, there is a pocket allowance of £3 per term. As his scholarship is retrospective to his initial entry to the college, you should submit to my office as soon as possible claims for whatever expenditure you incurred during the past year under the above terms for reimbursement. Accept my warmest congratulations. Yours faithfully, R.D. White, Area Manager. For 5 whole minutes, nobody spoke. It was a miracle indeed, unbelievable. Then a flood of tears began to run down Mbamu's face, and then down his mother's. Tears of joy. Elati too was no exception. He wiped his eyes several times with the back of his hand. Mbamu sat still, staring straight ahead of him. He saw himself and all his friends running and playing in the football fields. He saw himself performing experiments in the laboratory. He saw himself hurrying to the dining hall. He saw the principal giving opening speech for the new term. In the crowded assembly hall, he saw himself growing bigger and bigger and taller and shouting orders to the junior students. He saw all the students gathered under the balcony of the father's house, and then he stood up and started past his parents. He started to sing very gently. Near the Fako mountain, high above the sea, stands St. Joseph's College, a place for you and me. 'Tis here where we learn biology and geometry and chemistry. Oh, set by the mountain. Oh, set by the sea. 'Tis here where we learn biology and geometry and chemistry. Oh, set by the mountain. Oh, set by the sea. And that's the end of our story. We hope you enjoyed this story. And join us next week as the author joins us in a conversation about the text. Until next time, I am Manondo Akono saying thank you for responding to this summon.